Hello and welcome back to Module 2, Lesson 3, Pricing. So what will we cover in this lesson? We're going to talk a bit about ways that you might like to charge, so how you'll charge. We're going to talk about knowing what to charge, and we're going to talk a little bit about discounts and freebies as well. Okay, so how will you charge? So there's actually lots of different ways that you might charge. So probably the one you might think of first off is hourly rates. So that's quite common is to, and that's how I charged out for the work that I did, was to have an hourly rate and then just bill that based on the number of hours that you do. So when it comes to hourly rates, I would say one of the things that I would recommend too is to be really clear about what your hourly rates are. You might have different hourly rates for different jobs. But also, one thing that I found really, really important as well over the years is that you need to be really clear with your client about the number of hours that jobs might take if you're charging by an hourly rate. So basically, the idea there being that there aren't any nasty surprises, so that you might provide a quote or an estimate to your client to say you think the job's going to cost so many hours, so that they're clear up front that this job's going to cost me, $500 or $1,000 or whatever it is based on your hourly rate. And then if for some reason it looks like you're going to go over that time, it's been more complicated or whatever, then to be able to let your client know as soon as possible that there's going to be more cost than that. Because working on an hourly rate can provide a bit less certainty for the client, because than it would be if you charged a set rate. Because there's that ability, there's that risk of there being some variability if things take longer, and potentially costing longer, costing more if it takes longer. So think about that in terms of how you want to structure your charging. Monthly rates is another thing. So monthly rates are quite common in things like, I see it quite a lot in terms of things like managing social media packages, those kind of things. So where people might charge you a set rate for a particular number of social media posts. Monthly rates could also be, each month, a bit like a subscription. Someone pays you a certain number of dollars a month, and they get a certain number of hours of your time. So that's quite a nice one for you, particularly when your business is new. If you can get some people signed up on that, and you say, well, maybe you have a 6 monthly package where it costs X dollars a month, and then that person gets X hours of your time for that period. And you might like to offer that at a slightly discounted rate than what your hourly rate might be, because that gives you that certainty of having that certain number of hours of work. And it could be that if the client requires you to do more than the number of hours that your package covers, that then you'd move to the hourly rate at maybe the higher rate or whatever you think works for you. But I've seen quite a few virtual assistants and that kind of thing offering monthly packages to do a certain number of hours. And a monthly package could also be something that involves a certain number of tasks. So, in terms of doing like a package deal, it could be that rather than charging for a certain number of hours a month, you do a package that involves doing certain tasks, whatever works for your, the area that you're working in. But it might be that say you're a photographer and you're doing photos for someone who wants photos for their product business. They want photos of it's a toy company, and they want a certain number of photos of their toys that they can use for their website and that kind of thing each month. And you might say, well, if a package rates, $399 for 10 photos or whatever, or it's, $1,000 for 20 photos or whatever it is that you think is appropriate. And then you can have, again, you might offer it at a slightly discounted rate to what you would do if it was a one-off job, so that you have that regular income coming in, and you provide a certain offer for the package that you've put together. And the package might be a series of things. If you're a social media manager, it might be to do so many static posts, so many reels or videos or whatever it is that you do, and you charge a package rate for that each month. There's quite a lot of packages like that as well. And then the other thing you might like to do is a job rate. So that might be a fixed amount of dollars that you charge someone to do a job like creating a website, where you feel like you've got a pretty good idea that it's going to cost, say $1,000 to set up a website, and then usually for you it will take you so many hours, so you can sort of work out whether that's a good deal for you. And you might like to have some sort of a get out of jail free card in there, in that if the client wants more than like you might say, well, okay, $1,000 gives you a basic website with, I don't know, 3 pages or something like that designed up. But if the customer wanted you to do a 10-page website with, all the bells and whistles, that it would be more. And again, I mean, you could have package rates for those kind of things as well, but it might be that, you prefer to do a job by job rate, or you might have a combination of all of these things. So, depending on what you do, I mean, you might have some clients that only want you to do an hour of work. You might have some that the monthly packages work better for them, or you might have clients that have a job that's a bit out of the ordinary, and they want a quote for you to do a range of different jobs, or to do a particular big job, and then you could do that on the job rates. So lots of different ways that you can charge people, and you can have a bit of a play around with this and figure out what works for you. You might like to start out with an hourly rate and then work out some packages once you've got a better feel for the kinds of offerings that are going to be really helpful for your client. So this ties in quite well with the work that we have done on creating an offering as well. So you might like to go back to your office and think about how you can pull those together to create some packages and price them accordingly. So knowing what to charge is quite a tricky one, and often it is something that we don't like to do. It can feel a bit icky talking about money, and also coming up with what we feel like is a good hourly rate, because sometimes it can feel like we're a bit expensive. But we have to be really careful not to undercut ourselves as well. So I've seen a lot of women who tend to charge less than what they really should do for the work that they're doing. I don't know why we do it, but sometimes we tend to undervalue ourselves a little bit, or we don't think we're good enough, we don't think we're going to get the work of our rates higher. But then we kind of do ourselves a bit of a disservice if we charge too little. So I think what I wanted to do in this slide is to help you to get a good idea about knowing what you should charge. So what's a fair rate for what you're doing? So, for example, if you're doing an hourly rate, you could have a bit of a think about what your current hourly rate is. So, often when we're working for an employer, they'll have a rate that they charge us out at. So you could think, well, okay, I'm working, doing this design work in a design company. And when we design marketing material for this, for clients, my boss charges me out at $70 an hour. So that gives you kind of an idea of what people are prepared to pay for someone to do the work that you're doing. And you might think, oh gosh, that's quite expensive. But you've got to remember too, when you're charging out, on your own, you've got costs to come off that. So the $70 won't go in your pocket. Well, not all of the $70 will go in your pocket. You've got tax to pay and that kind of thing coming off that. So it might sound like a lot, but you've got expenses to come off that as well. So looking at your current hourly rate can give you an idea of what people are willing to pay for the kind of services that you're looking at offering as well. And if you don't have a current hourly rate, you might like to think about the hourly rate that you get paid at your job. So, you might get paid X dollars an hour for the job that you do. And that gives you a bit of an idea about, the amount of money that you're happy to receive per hour for the work that you're doing. But then you've got to remember too, when you're a freelancer, you've got costs that need to come off that as well. So, you've got your tax, which will most likely be similar to what you're paying now. But you'll check that with your accountant, of course. But then, you'll have your other business expenses that you don't have necessarily when you're working in a regular job. So you might feel that actually the hourly rate you get paid now isn't enough for you to make money, additional expenses that you might have as a freelancer. So that just gives you something to kind of work off. I mean, your hourly rate might or might not be what you want to charge to your clients, but it gives you a something to sort of compare to. The other thing you might like to look at too is what are the going rates in your industry. So rather than looking at what you're getting paid or what your company's charging you out at, having a bit of doing a bit of research, having a look around to see what other people are charging. So, there's a number of ways that you can do this. You can look online and see, quite a lot of different companies will have packages that they advertise on their website. So, find out in your niche what other people are charging, do a bit of sleuthing around and see what information you can find about what the going rates are. Another thing that you could potentially do is to ask for a quote for a job. Like if you were curious about what the going rates are and you can't find out information about what the cost is to do a website, you could send an email to a web development company and ask them what the cost is to have a website designed. And then that'll give you an idea of, again, the sorts of prices that people are charging. You can also, put posts into some of those social media groups that we talked about, some of the business groups, and you could ask people. I mean, sometimes people might not be willing to tell you what their going rate is, but if you ask people, for example, in terms of, say, the website, for example, you might put a post up there and say, what's the going rate for a website? And then some people could just, pop, oh, well, I paid $2,000 for my website and, thought that was a pretty good deal, those kind of things. So there's lots of ways you can do your research and find out what the going rates are for work. And you might even have some own industry knowledge yourself about what the going rates are in your industry. And the other thing too that you could do is to ask your ideal clients. So that might seem a little bit awkward, but again, sometimes your ideal clients are people that are your colleagues, your friends. You can ask around and find out what they believe the rates are for the kind of services that you want to do. Or again, you can jump on those Facebook groups and say, look, I'm looking at starting this business and this is what I'm going to offer. What would you pay for this? Just as a way to kind of test the market and get an idea of what people are willing to pay. I would just qualify that one just a little bit, because sometimes people might want to pay less than what you want to get paid. So again, it's another one of those things that it's good to know, but you just take that on board and then work out whether that's the right advice for you as well. And again, when it comes to going back to the last slide where we were talking about all the different ways you can charge. So, obviously hourly rates aren't the only way that you can get paid. So you'll want to do a bit of research into what you think the right rates are for you to charge for packages, for example. And that's where it might be quite helpful finding out, looking at some other people's websites and doing some comparisons of what you were thinking with what other people are charging. And by doing that, I'm not meaning to copy, but just as a bit of a cross check for what you were thinking. And sometimes you might be pleasantly surprised that at what other people are charging for similar work. Okay, so something else that I wanted to bring up that I thought would be helpful is discounts and freebies. And I think this is something that you need to be a little bit careful about, because we don't want to get too far into the place of doing a lot of work for really cheap rates or free. But I do think sometimes it's worthwhile considering it for your first jobs to do some discounts or even offer a freebie, and it could be as much as just a free hour, just to get people on board, just to get those first clients in. You might offer some either a discounted rate or some sort of special deal to get the clients in the door and get them get the work coming in and be able to get those first referrals that are so important. So you'll have an idea about what you think works for you, but it might be something like a percentage discount. It might be a bit like I did some work with a VA, and she was offering a package to do, I think it was 1 hour a day free just to get to know her for a week or something like that. So, you could do something like that so that it's a little bit of time that you're giving up to be able to get those first jobs, and preferably if you can design those, if you're giving away free time, that you're getting something in exchange for it. So you're not just working for free, but that it's for every new customer signed up this month, I'll give you an hour free time, or for every new package deal signed up this month, I'll give you, 2 hours a month free or something like that, because obviously there's some value in those monthly packages for you. So something that you might like to consider just to get things moving, and then over time you'll probably find that you can stop doing that once you've got more work coming in. Now, the next one that I've put on there too is to consider lower value tasks. I've put that in inverted commas. So what I mean there is that if I use my work as an example, so lower value tasks. So I was doing legal work that had an element of admin work, and then an element of, sort of legal research work. And the legal research work, I was able to charge out at a higher rate. But the admin work, because the sort of going rate for the admin work, things like transcribing audio tapes or doing invoicing, was a lot lower than the legal research rate. So even though I was doing work for the same person, the rate that I would charge was for the admin work was quite a bit lower than the legal research work. And that might sound a bit strange to you, but in those early days, the person I was working for needed an admin assistant and they needed some legal research work, but they didn't have enough legal research work for me to be able to earn as much as I needed to. So for me at that time, it was worth my while taking on the admin role, which is now being taken over by an admin person. Now there's more of the legal work for me to do, but to me, from a financial perspective, having that lower paying admin work at the start was actually really, really important, because it meant that I did have the regular cash flow. And then over time, as I got busier with more other work, I was able to drop off doing that admin work and take on the higher paid tasks. So that's all I mean when I say consider lower value tasks. It might be worth taking on some of those jobs at the outset just to get things off the ground, and then hopefully over time you could either stop doing that work, or you might be able to outsource that work. You might be able to get someone to come work with you and then do those lower value tasks where you still invoice that onto your client, but you pay someone a lower hourly rate to do those tasks so that you can do the higher paid tasks and get more money for that. And it's quite nice to do it that way too, if you're able to bring in, another person to work for you as well, because then if ever down the track you need that work back again, you've still got it. You haven't sort of referred that off and the person's found somebody else to do it. It's still a stream of income that's coming towards your business. And then the last 3 points that I've got there. So what I was referring to, so I've got consider for value, consider for ongoing, consider for social proof. So basically, all of these things are offering discounts and freebies are taking money out of your pocket. So while it's a nice little incentive to get people in the door to start with. It's about thinking about how you're going to get some sort of value out of the transaction as well. So if you're working for free, can you get some sort of social proof? Can you get the person to agree to do a review or a referral or something like that? You know, the discounts and freebies, you know, the reason why I think they're really good for package deals is that it helps you get those regular payments coming in. So when you have a 6-month or a 12-month package that someone signs up for, you might offer them a bigger discount. And, you know, it's great for them because it's cheaper for them than hiring you on a month by month or an hourly basis. But for you, the value in that is that you know you've got 6 or 12 months of work coming up, and that gives you the security. So it's really just about making sure there's a bit of balance in it, and that you're not the one that's doing all of the giving away, but you're actually getting something out of it as well. So some things to remember in terms of this: make sure you don't devalue yourself. I think as women, as I mentioned, it's something we have a bit of a tendency to do, is to feel like my mum used to talk about it. I think it was called broken biscuit syndrome, and that mums in particular are often used, or women, but particularly mums, the ones who often eat the broken biscuits in the packet. You know, we give the good biscuits to the kids and then we eat the ones that are broken. But we want to remember in this, we don't want to be the one with the broken biscuits. We want to be earning as much as we can, and, you know, valuing the work that we do correctly. So it's about making sure that you don't undercharge because you feel nervous about the number, when really you know that, you know, the going rate is this, and, you know, you might even be offering under the going rate and or offering at the going rate, and that actually what you're doing is you're offering good value to your clients for the work that you're doing. So don't devalue yourself and offer less than what you're worth. And then the other thing I put there too is you might be so pleasantly surprised when you become a freelancer, because you're probably thinking, oh gosh, I'm only going to be able to charge a small hourly price. But you might find that you're actually able to charge a lot more than what you're getting paid now. So it's a bit of that thing that I mentioned previously about where, you know, when you're working for an employer, often your employer pays you an hourly rate, and then but the actual going rate in your industry is a lot more. So say your employer might pay you $35 an hour as your salary, but they actually bill you out for $100 an hour to a client. So then when it comes to you doing the work, the clients are used to paying $100 for someone to do that kind of work. And so, you know, you can bill out probably closer to that $100 an hour rate, if not at the $100 an hour rate, rather than the price that your boss was paying you as a salary, because obviously they've got their other business costs and they wanted to make a profit on top of that. So you could find that you could still offer a really competitive rate that's more than what you're on at the moment, and potentially still less than what the going rate is in your industry. The other thing, as I've mentioned in previous lessons too, is you do need to pay tax. So make sure that whatever you are charging, you've made allowances so that your expenses like tax are covered, because you don't want to undercharge and then realize that actually tax still has to come off that, and then actually what you get in your hand at the end of the day is less. So make sure you're clear about how much tax you need to pay. And I always think it's a good idea to talk to your accountant to understand all of your tax obligations. But also, usually you can find a calculator of some sort on the government website to help you work out what your tax is likely to be. But for me, I always prefer to have a bit of expert advice on the tax side of things, because it's definitely not my area of expertise and I don't like surprises. So recommend getting that little bit of help to make sure that you're clear on what percentage of your income is going to be taxed. And for me, I spoke to my accountant and she said, well, if you put aside X percentage of each invoice, then you should have enough at the at tax time to pay your taxes. And usually what happened is by the time I got to the end of my tax return was done, I actually had to pay less than the amount I put aside. So it was a bit like having a bit of a bonus at the end, but it was better to have it that way than the other way around. And then, as I mentioned, you do have business expenses too. So make sure you're charging enough that you don't end up cutting yourself short because you've got to pay for, your phone and your internet and anything else that you might have had to get, any subscriptions or anything you might have had to get for your business. So you don't want to sell yourself short and undercharge and then realize that actually you're making a lot less money than you thought you were going to do. And then finally, also in the realms of the tax world is GST. I have mentioned this before, but getting clear on whether you need to charge GST, and if you do need to charge GST, making sure that you deal with that correctly in your invoicing. So again, often it will be a case of adding GST to your invoice at the end. So it'll be X dollars plus GST, because you don't want to find that you've charged a rate and then later on you actually have to pay the GST and you haven't charged that on in your invoice, because that would be another nasty surprise. So again, advice around that would be recommended. And now another little quote that I wanted to share with you, just because I love quotes, and I think this one I saw somewhere online, but I really liked it. And it says, "If I do a job in 30 minutes, it's because I spent 10 years learning how to do it. You owe me for the years, not the minutes." So sometimes people might go to you, "Oh wow, that's quite expensive. That's a lot for just doing that one thing." But what you're charging for is your experience and your knowledge, and so it's taken you a lot of effort to get to the point where you can charge the hourly rate that you can charge. You've had to get educated, you've had to have experience, you've had to set up this business, and so it's just about having the confidence to charge what you're worth and not let people drive you down because of their expectations about what they need to pay. And often what you'll find is that if people do have doubts, they might go around shopping around and find other prices and then realize actually for what you're doing, it's well worth it. So I think just another reminder that you're worth it and you should charge what you know you're worth, and not be scared to do that. Okay, so back to the action station. So spend some time doing some research if you're not too familiar with the hourly rates, and get clear on what the industry rates are for charging if you don't know that already. You might find out things like what are the hourly rates, what are package rates that people are offering, and see what gives you, some inspiration for how you might to set up your charging for your business. And then another thing, also, you could ask some ideal clients what they're prepared to pay. And if you don't have, real life people you can go and talk to about that, then ask your friends in your social media groups what their thinking is about what they're prepared to pay. So get into some of those online business groups. There's bound to be somebody in there who either has just paid for the kind of service you're wanting to do or is looking to pay for someone to do the kind of work that you're doing, and they are more than likely going to be happy to provide you with some feedback. And then the last task, of course, is to decide what your charge out rates are going to look like. So that's super exciting. Think back at what your offerings are. You might have already had some ideas about some packages of offerings that you want to put together. So now you can apply some charge out rates to those packages, and that is going to be really exciting because that's how you're going to get your money coming in. Okay, so that is the end of that lesson, and next we're going to move on to Module 2, Lesson 4, where we're going to talk a bit about budget and costs.